I want to propose an idea of Linnahall as a cultural megastructure. A megastructure was a building type from the mid-20th century which aimed to overcome urbanism and architecture, streets and separate buildings. So it was a small city in itself. And in a similar way, we can think of Linnahall as a megastructure that combines in a single frame different functions. It was situated in an industrial area at the time when it was built, so there was a railway line that was separating the harbor area from the rest of the city. So the first function of the building was to act as a railway bridge to overcome this separation and bring these different areas together. And in a way, we can think of this building through this idea of connecting different territories, different functions under a single frame. So there is the concert hall, there is an ice rink, there were many cafeterias, there was even a bowling alley, all the office spaces. So it all combined these various functions and connected them together through its architectural form. And we can see this kind of will to connect in different platforms, staircases that take to the upper plazas. And in a way, this connection, interconnection, an idea to bring people together, to initiate encounters between people, is something that is encoded into this building through its architecture. And another idea that maybe is significant to think about in case of Linnahall is the way that movement has been choreographed in a very careful way in this building. So I already mentioned that you come up to the platform from the city level and from the street level, and then this procession or a walk a long walk takes you to the entrance first of the ice rink and then of the concert hall. And when you enter the concert hall, then it is a very low foyer first in front of the ticket counter. And you don't come across a big space immediately. You actually face a blank wall when you enter the foyer. And you have to make a turn, either left or right, which takes you to another corridor, which is very long. You have to walk along that corridor and then make another turn, which takes you into this wardrobe space. And only then you make a turn and you encounter the huge foyer and the concert hall. So it's a kind of a walk that culminates in this huge amphitheater-shaped hall. And if we take this idea of a megastructure to its logical conclusion, we can think of the future of the Linnahall also through that idea. So it is possible, or there is certain kind of flexibility that this kind of form is capable of accommodating. That there are all these different functions. There were, some in the past that died away or withered away. There are some that were acquired as sort of an intermediary functions. There was the helicopter landing platform there for a while. There was the harbor or the hydrofoil port. So why not think of a similar kind of use in the future, that it is a frame or certain kind of architectural setting that is capable of housing these functions, taking new ones, letting go of others, but being flexible at the same time while keeping some very important axes and choreography still inside it. So if we want to think of some architectural parallels to this kind of space like Linnahall is, first comes to mind, of course, the mid-century huge cultural buildings in Western Europe or Japan, which in a similar way combine a space for people to come together and be seen. and see and have a look at others. But then the way Raine Karp and Riina Altmäe have handled space here is perhaps also interesting to think of some other parallels which are maybe not so straightforward. There's, first of all, this kind of choreography of kind of turning and walking and actually coming to the end point only after several turns is something, for example, that Frank Lloyd Wright has used in his buildings, like the Unity Temple in Oak Park, which has a very, very similar setup of kind of choreography in a much smaller scale. There are, of course, all these parallels to kind of prehistoric or archetypal forms and architecture in Louis Kahn that is usually drawn, which maybe are not so obvious for Estonian architecture at the time. But in some sense, this building also inaugurates this kind of interest in history and historical context and references to the old town and areas around it. And if we also think about how these kind of cultural megastructures have been used elsewhere, then in very many ways we live in a moment where big, huge cultural wholes are being redefined, and the entertainment structure is different nowadays. So maybe a lot of this kind of community interaction has moved into social media rather than physical space. But we can think of buildings in London South Bank, for example, which still function in these multiple ways, or multiple through this multiple use, and are capable of kind of maintaining its architectural form while also accommodating other, renewing or ephemeral functions, like meeting or providing space for skateboarders or small shops and cafeterias.
I think Linnahall has been often considered to be a megastructure, a monolithic ziggurat, a Mayan temple in a waterfront that actually closes down all different kind of movements, cross movements around it. And I think that's really a one scale to look at it. You can look at it in an urban scale and you see a huge structure. You can look at it at the building scale and still seems to be something that is unreachable, a closed system. But I think as soon as you arrive here and see it from a human scale, you start understanding the potential porosity that this building has inside of it. So from the beginning on, it was planned with railways going through it, but actually there's way more of those cross-sectional movements possible within this structure. And I think not only looking at it as a longitudinal access to the sea from the city center, we should see all this potential that is inside, or that's hidden inside of those arcades between the buildings. So I think Linnahall is worth to be looked at in a human perspective and not to be dealt like an urban megastructure that needs to be teared down. I think the other way around. We need this kind of cultural layers, the historic layering inside of our urban environment that hints us and educates us from architectural visions of that time. And now with this open competition, I think it's very important for you to show us the high potential of these kind of structures looking at it from a master scale, but down to human scale, down to material scale, and how to keep these sensitive, poetic layers of our urban environment, because they're never gonna be a tabula rasa in European cities. Understandably, we need to keep this, and I think the current understanding of all those rewords, retrofitting, reconstructing, renovating, I think we have been trained as architects to understand this, understand those dialogues that we create with the new and old one. And I think this guy here has a high potential to mingle with those understandings. Describing the building as something that is an historic layer in urban grid, I think every person, at least, who has been growing up in Tallinn or nearby Tallinn has its own historic story to tell as well. So I've been a lot here as a kid, even though it has been closed down officially more than 15 years. Then I think some of my first dates were on top of here on a roof, as it is the best sunset ground for a romantic drink, and of course it's out of the sight, so you can have your. I think I had some of my first wines there as well. So in any case, the upper roof, especially the staircases, is still used actively to enjoy sunsets from early spring to late autumn.
I would call my lecture Metaphysical Dimension of Linnahall. What I most enjoy about the Linnahall or City Hall in translation is the obvious, I would say, totally tangible metaphysical dimension of this wonderful piece of architecture. It makes somehow being and time visible, even graspable. The City Hall is from Soviet occupation period, which makes it problematic to many people. On the other hand, an environment that perceives architecture and other elements from several eras is actually much cozier to humans than an environment built within a single time period. There are many explanations to this phenomena, why we like multi-layered, multi-historical layered cities better than cities built from a grasp. For example, there is the attention restoration theory in environmental psychology, which says that plentiful space backed with choice of discovery creates some sort of mental comfort. What is really interesting about space and cityscape is that it can accommodate contradictions and objects with a different ideology. For example, a text which contains contradictions doesn't make sense. It doesn't work because it becomes absurd or something like that. But space somehow manages contradictions by juxtaposing them or placing them next to each other. There can be contradictions and conflicts sizzling between the different historical layers. Perhaps this is the very part of the metaphysical dimension. Juxtaposing and highlighting the contradiction gives voice to the societies of different eras. This kind of conflict is stimulating, I would say, sobering also, and creates the preconditions for being precise and smart and wise. It reminds us that no ideology is self-sufficient and invokes skepticism toward all-encompassing or total spatial solutions. It dismisses the false belief that we can create ideal space based on beliefs and knowledge of only one era. Contradictory space keeps us sensible and smart, as I already mentioned. For example, Italian humanist Anton Francesco Toni has written, while he was in his Venetian rental apartment, about the everyday sounds, artworks and buildings in the space around him, and how these extraordinary buildings in a Venetian cityscape makes his mind wander. He describes how in passing from everyday items to historical objects and to the looking at the buildings, an integrated experience is born. And he says, "I am in every country at once and see all mankind if I stand at the window." And that's what made this wonderful Venetian cityscape, and I think that is pretty much happening here also, and in a way thanks to the City Hall.
For me, one of the most inspiring aspects of the Linnahall is the dramaturgy, which is part of the, I would say, scenography and choreography of the whole building. Architect Rainer Karp wanted to connect the interior and exterior spaces, and how he did that is quite ingenious, I would say. The exterior is a quite closed one, with a monumental earth gathered around the building, while the core of the building is the large, more than 4,000 seat capacity auditorium. In order to connect those two very different layers of space, he suggested to use large open areas, the foyers, with wardrobes and areas for the larger audience to gather, and later after the events to leave and socialize as well. So you have a sequence of auditorium, the wardrobe area, the foyer, and the exterior space. Usually in large monumental public buildings, they are not connected visually. They might have quite separate borders. But here, Karp suggested that it is possible to connect them. So how to do that? How to enable this connectedness of those very different parts of architectural space? Karp, together with structural engineers, suggested a quite ambitious structural system. So the main auditorium and the foyer space is covered with two more than 60-meter span steel girders, pre-stressed steel girders. So those create a space of 60 and 104 meters. So it's 0.6 hectare area, interior area, which is basically without structural support. So when you open the screen surrounding the auditorium, the visual connects from the sea to the auditorium and back. If you walk outside the auditorium, you can see the sea if the doors or the sliding screen door is opened. So the ambitious structural solution, it does not consist only of those steel girders, but there are several substantial material as well as structural innovations in this building. The smaller part, the ice skating rink, also has a system which is based on two parallel steel girders, but those are so-called full wall or solid wall girders, and their span is a little smaller than a large auditorium has. Also, there is a quite ambitious concrete structure just at the back side of the auditorium. It's a monolithic concrete structure for creating the space for the translators and technical staff who have their boxes just on the back edge of the auditorium. What I would also like to say in relation to the structural and actually more to the construction side of Linnahall is about the construction quality. Sure, the current state of the building is pretty bad, especially technically and in terms of exteriors and the outer layers of the building. But the main structures of the building are still intact and were built of high quality materials and on a very high level. Only those parts of the building which were built by non-professional construction workers have a lower degree of construction quality. But unfortunately, this is also the side which is more visible to the audience and to the visitors, especially in terms of the exterior part of the building. So I would say that the core of the building is built very well. Just the exterior side is somewhat problematic. So it is definitely not a ruin and could be repaired or repurposed for new uses. And just to wrap it up, I would say that considering the architectural drama, what is happening inside, what the architects choreographed here, enabled by the ambitious structural solution and the physicality of the materialized building, all those layers make it a substantial monument of the very recent history and could be an important landmark for future generations.
Another personal story of mine with Linnahall was the time when there were a lot of school festivals and fairs held here. And as a student, I think in the second grade, we had to dance here on this huge stage. And on the stage, I think there was like 20 people at the same time, but one can imagine how many were in the audience. I guess the same or even less, meaning that this 4,262 seats that this building or this main hall has are rarely, if ever, filled. And I think that's also one of very important trigger of this competition is how to actually section this, or how to deal with the fact that you don't always have to have a full house here, but still get the feeling that you are one with the audience. So I think this huge auditorium definitely carries also a high potential, but also a big challenge, how to activate it in a meaningful way. Another personal story of mine with Linnahall is connected to those built-in flower pots. The fact that you can put quite a lot of earth here it really smoothly combined the outdoor greenery, the exterior, how the building is sort of flushed or taken over by the landscape, and then extending this to the interior. And to this symmetric, rigid system as Linnahall is, it really gave this kind of dialogue between the rigidity and chaos, organized and steady, fixed system. And another thing to keep in mind here, with my school fairs that always happened here in the end of August, early September, where you get all the equipment necessary for your school year, they were selling their stuff, their pencils and books, around this area in front of this, I think there was the Soviet largest curtain wall that is actually raised fully, this 180 degrees, fully raised into this ceiling structure. And as you can see, the varying height of the ceiling, that also sort of defines how you inhabit this space. So it gets more private and personalized towards the sea, and then it gets higher and higher. The more public it gets, further connecting it to the main auditorium. So I think the ceiling height is also something that really helps you to direct yourself in a building. And I think this flushed in greenery, this merging of the landscape also indoors, really gave the building some kind of smoothness and connectivity.
I wanted to bring out this topography type Karst that I found as a parallel in an interview with Riina Altmäe, an architect of Linnahall alongside Raine Karp. And though it is not rare or in any way original to compare Linnahall to a landscape, and you can find multiple quotes and interviews where it's described as a kind of new bastion or resembling Inca temples, then I found this parallel of Karst's landscape and quite specific topography comparison that could guide not only the exterior form but also internal structure of the building, somehow very understandable design process-wise, without seeming too forced as a concept or metaphor. Materiality-wise, Linnahall is often noted with its limestone skin, but I find it somehow interesting to think about how material qualities can guide design, not only regarding their physical properties and abilities, but how this material, limestone, occurs in its natural environment. For me, the name of this building, Linnahall, has very strong connotations with the color grey, which is very obvious if you're an Estonian speaker, as the word hall signifies both a hall, such as City Hall, but also color grey. And even though it's very easy to mock modern or contemporary architecture of being very grey or even black, then still I find that Linnahall manages to capture something very intrinsic to Tallinn. And I'm not thinking of anything particularly nice or even grandiose, even though it's obviously a gigantic example of what could never be built in Tallinn if it weren't for several occupations. But I'll try to open up this Tallinness that Linnahall seems to capture. Some days ago I had a walk over this very icy Linnahall, but I didn't take the maybe more usual route of going over the building and then towards the sea, but instead walked around to the seaside and then climbed up and approached the city over the building. And somehow this very icy climb exemplified how neat and indeed polite this building is towards Tallinn and its towers. That you have this city on your palm. It also brought to my mind how often, regarding the seaside of Tallinn, these kind of aspirations and examples are brought from Helsinki and Oslo, which indeed are two cities very or almost on the same latitude as Tallinn, but with a fundamental difference of facing the sea towards the south. And my little walk over Linnahall made me wonder if the name of the building is indeed very fitting, and that if the whole world was different and upside down and we had the sea to the south, then maybe our Linnahall or City Hall wouldn't be a city hall but would be named Merehall, a sea hall. And maybe it seems like completely irrelevant and not that important, as in the end, to walk towards the city you first have to get to the seaside. But it seems important to note that this climb over the building manages to elevate this city, which often actually is called a town, to be honest.
Tallinn has for a long time had vision of opening Tallinn up to the sea. Linnahall is actually a forerunner or a pioneer for this. One of the first or even maybe first public building that has constructed next to the sea in Tallinn city center. Tallinn has made really long and difficult, almost 100-year journey to the sea. And in the course of this journey, development plans and actual deeds have been proven to be quite inconsistent. In the 19th and 20th century, the seafront was allocated to industrial and harbour buildings rather than lively city streets. The 1912 project of Great Tallinn by L. Saarinen likewise foresaw the seaside part of the city centre accommodating only production activities and a closed harbour area. Soviet-era general plans described Tallinn as a maritime city. Unfortunately, this description found a really modest expression on the ground. And it was as late as 1980 in connection with the construction for the summer Olympic sailing event, and this was exactly the year when Linnahall was built. After the end of the Soviet period in 1990s, it took about a decade before the seafront and the industrial heritage came back on the agenda. But the still unused potential of Tallinn, possibility of establishing a seaside city centre, was increasingly discussed, and the only structure plan approved by Tallinn City Council focused namely on the development of the city seaside. Thus, the opening Tallinn up to the sea became the only urban development vision steering the city through the stormy sea of neoliberalism in the hectic beginning of the 2000s. In the neighborhood of Linnahall, there are three more or less maritime districts. New Kalaranna quarter that was just completed, renovated former industrial district Noblessner, and also renovated former industrial district Rotermann. Emergence of Rotermann, Noblessner and Kalaranna district has significantly shaped how we think about public space and industrial heritage here in Estonia. On the top of Linnahall, all these key districts can be seen. We do not really understand what is milieu and what it takes for the authenticity of a place actually to survive. Does it suffice merely to preserve what is old, or perhaps even crumbling, and to contrast layers from different areas? How we actually retain the unique functions, peculiarities and use of space, and how to create this authentic milieu. The site of Tallinn waterfront is still unfinished, filled with construction cranes, and it creates a really good feeling. There is still much here that has not become totally predictable and sleek, and authentic daily activities are still going on here. But will there be still room for imagination once the construction cranes are gone? A space that has been totally designed or solved on the basis of generic declarative principles does not speak. As told before, the historical contradiction we can find here in this area gives voice to societies of different eras. It makes them visible and audible. The contradictions excite, disillusionize us about humankind and keep us focused in what is specific, and it also triggers our imagination as described before in case of Venice. Carl Gustav Jung has said that the bottom of the soul is poetical. I think it is a miracle to have an architecture piece that easily touches this bottom of the soul, like Linnahall does.